Welcome to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito from Private Vista. In this podcast, we draw from years of experience as well as guest specialists to help you create the life you imagine. Join us in this journey as we enlighten and empower you to align your lifestyle to help you achieve your goals with a clear picture of your future. Now, let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Dollars and Cents podcast with your host, Nicole Romito. Nicole, it's time for part 2. How are you?
It is. If you can believe it, I'm even more excited than I was for part 1. How about you?
I always believe you. Yes. Yes. We got a little technical about qualified plans in the last episode. For those of you who
There's
did
really
not,
no way around it, but yes.
Yeah. No, I know. I understand that. And it's important stuff. So for those of you who are tuning in and did not hear part 1, stay tuned. Listen to part 2 because we're going to cover some different areas with Stephanie. And then go back and listen to part 1 because this really is conceived as a whole. So we want you to consume it that way. You can consume part 2 before part 1. Like sometimes you can eat dessert before dinner. So Nicole, with that, I hand it over to you.
Well, now I'm hungry. Thanks, Bill. Yes, no, I do agree. First of all, for our listeners who have not listened to part 1 yet, I have one of my partners in studio with me. I'd like to welcome back Stephanie Nanney.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back.
No, absolutely. Real quick again, we gave her full bio in part 1, but as I just mentioned, Stephanie is a partner and owner of our firm. She's also a lead advisor. And the reason she is my guest today is our conversation is focused on financial planning for medical professionals. And she has a lot of clients in this area and then also heads up our group that puts together our our planning strategies and things like that for this part of our client base. So that's why we've got Stephanie on today. What we're going to focus on is how is financial planning different for you as an individual if you are a medical professional? So that's what we're going to highlight today. So why don't we just kind of jump right in then? So I think, as our listeners know, we're very process focused. We always start off with a comprehensive financial plan for all of our clients, regardless of their career or how they earn their money. But why don't you kind of start off with medical professionals are a bit unique?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons why. We're going to highlight a couple of them and talk through some. But the biggest reasons that are not going to be a surprise to anyone are medical professionals tend to have a large amount of debt when they finish their career. And that debt is sometimes as well, if they have a spouse or a partner, have possibly met that spouse or partner in their professional school. So there are 2 sides of debt.
Wow. The double whammy.
Exactly. And so that's a big piece of what makes the planning different potentially. But then the second piece in addition is the almost delayed start into the professional workforce,
right,
at the levels of income that they expect to earn. And so that has a piece of the puzzle as it relates to what are your short, mid, and long-term goals. So those are the two big things that we should touch on for sure.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're coming out of med school and then, if you had a specialty and fellowships and residencies and things like that, it's not uncommon that you could be just earning income, in your late 20s, if not early 30s.
Exactly. And by a lot of times then that associates to right as you start to earn your income, you potentially want to think about a family or buying your permanent residence or upgrading from a smaller residence to a larger residence because those things are coming in succession. So we'll go down that path
so
first.
That's what I say. What I'm hearing is a lot of competing priority.
Yeah.
And even though their income, generally speaking, they're going to have a material amount of income, those are a lot of big ticket items that you just mentioned. So how do you help clients? How do you have that conversation? Walk us through that.
Yeah. Nicole and I talk about this a lot for all of our clients, but again, focusing on medical professionals, the competing buckets, if you will. And what we mean by buckets is, how do you decide which one to fill up when? And when I say fill up, that could even be filling up your filling up or dumping out your debt bucket versus filling up a home savings bucket versus, and this is, go back to episode 1 if you haven't yet, but are you also thinking about buying into a medical practice?
Right.
So as you just mentioned, Nicole, competing, those things alone are spending money in the short term. And then on top of it, how do you then decide your other 2 buckets, or 3 or 4, are personal saving for college? This is another one where I'll digress for just a quick minute on what's different about medical professionals. Is many medical professionals want to have the ability to, if they can, help provide for schooling past undergraduate degrees, because that's what they then have. They have a graduate degree, they have your medical degree, your dental
Right.
degree, whatever it might be, have the ability to possibly provide for that for children. So instead of just planning for 4 years of college, planning for 8 years of schooling is that's another big bucket to fill up.
And that's a really important point, because I know we've seen that not only with our medical professional clients, but if the client was an attorney
Mhm.
or they're a CPA, or, a lot of our finance clients, our listeners know I don't have kids, but what I do know is also it's pretty rare that people are getting out of undergrad in 4 years. So
Exactly. And so that's a big planning consideration as well.
we're
So I
talking
think,
huge dollars.
yeah. And I think, Nicole, as you mentioned, how do you figure out what those priorities are? And then the second piece of that is working with us in order to help figure out the best way to leverage those, because most likely the answer is all of them.
Right. Right. I mean, time is your friend when it
Yeah.
comes to savings and investing.
Exactly. But then all of them, in terms of, you probably want to be getting in a home, buying into a practice, and paying off your debt all at the
all
same
at the
time.
same time. Right.
So how do you figure out the leverage of those pieces is really an important reason why it's different than some other professions.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you either want to maybe share an example or a few tips? I know each client is unique and individualized, and we do tailor our strategy and advice to each person. But I think we can say, there might be a couple general considerations, or if you want to share an example that can kind of walk through to answer the question, well, okay, Stephanie, how do I leverage or position all my different buckets?
Yeah. I think the first is understanding all the resources that are available to you. A lot of conversations are going to be focused on, where are you in your profession today? So are you working for someone, or are you trying to own a practice?
Okay.
And so the reason that's important is the structure of a buy into a practice may dictate your free cash flow and or how much you can leverage other places. So then that conversation, I think really the tips and tricks is making sure you're not looking at things in a very 1 to 2 year range. We really need to think about 3 or 5 years. And so get started on the planning is the first tip, because some people might say, well, I'm only in my 30s. Do I really have to do retirement planning? And we're
Right.
not just talking about that. You want to focus on the fact that if you're getting ready to buy a house, how will that impact what you might have as a goal in the next 1.5 to 2 years? Because especially if you have a large student loan debt, that doesn't affect things like getting a mortgage, depending on your earnings, but it could affect things like having a debt associated to buying into a practice, potentially. Those
Okay.
are all just things we want to look at, but we have to look to know what the choices are for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think tip number 1 is we can't look at any one piece of the puzzle in a vacuum or a silo.
Exactly. I think tip number 2, as you said, Nicole, is time is on your side to some extent, but always getting started earlier. Another theme that I hear from new clients are, I just hate my student loan debt. I hate it. I want it
It
gone.
definitely weighs on people, and
It does.
understandably,
Yes,
and
exactly.
especially for medical professionals, because there's a lot of dollars to the left of the decimal point.
Exactly. So what are the math behind getting rid of it faster or saving? And is it somewhere in the middle? And we understand completely, as you said, Nicole, getting rid of it is really, really important. But when we think about, depending on what your interest rate was,
Right.
what is the cash flow associated to it? How big of a debt is it? There may be conversations around keeping some of it, getting rid of some of it. But if I meet someone that says, all I did for the first 7 years of my career was pay off my debt, and now I have zero savings and I don't own my home yet, we would like to have talked through that a little bit earlier and decide if that was the appropriate or the best use of the dollars that are coming into the household as now a high earning medical professional.
Yeah.
So that's really tip 2 is, yes, we like getting rid of debt as well, but thinking about if what makes no sense.
Yeah.
In what order?
Because I think a lot of people, there's so much in the news or, on your screen pop-ups on your phone and other devices of, debt is bad, get rid of it. Currently, we're in Stephanie and I would say more of a normalized interest rate environment. But for many people, especially if you're just coming out of school, they're going to be like, wow, the interest rates are really high right now. So instead of kind of reacting or using a generic rule of thumb, really by having a plan, and especially with an advisor who understands medical professionals, you can really say, what is the best way to allocate my income at this point?
Exactly.
So-
That's really the big, because it's a different amount of income all of a sudden. That's the other big thing.
Exactly,
It's,
yeah.
Lots of people go through career paths that go up and up and up over time.
Gradually, right,
Exactly.
promotions or raises, and you're literally going from, maybe you're getting $50,000 during your residency or a fellowship to much higher of
Exactly.
that. It can be paralyzing. While it's a great thing and you've worked hard for it, it can be really paralyzing and scary for people, especially if they're not sure of the best strategy to utilize it.
Exactly.
So
I think and then the next most important thing is the whole protection side of thing. So what Nicole just mentioned is doing the planning is so important. But when we talk about the defensive planning or the protection, what's a little bit different for medical professionals in a fact of disability planning, and also, again, depending on your household income, should your income not be available to you anymore, how do you protect the loved ones that you're caring for?
right, who are dependent on that income.
Exactly. So just a quick note on disability income is, again, many medical professionals are in a very specific specialty.
Yes.
What you want to make sure is happening is that should you unfortunately be disabled, that you are paid disability income from an insurance policy that is not just because you could go and teach, if that's not what you want to do.
Right.
If you want to operate, you want to make sure that you have own occupation disability insurance so that you are paid if you can't operate. So that's step 1 is, are you doing all the protection things? That's disability only. Life insurance, again, Nicole and I work very hard to not put our finger in the air and wave and say, I think I need $1 million,
Right.
but what is the actual number that you need should your income not be there to protect your loved ones?
Right. And let's just kind of rehash some of the things we talked about. So especially it's the loss of all future income. It's also, do you want to pay off the mortgage on the house? You have a couple of kids, and as Stephanie highlighted, oftentimes medical professionals will be like, my kids are, I want to plan in case my kid or kids want to follow in our footsteps.
Exactly.
So that's a large bill. And then also too, just for your surviving spouse or partner, if they are working outside the home or not, to make sure that you're setting them up for financial independence ongoing.
Exactly.
So that can quickly get up into, the millions of dollars.
Exactly. And analyzing that, because again, now you are a medical professional that has high earnings and you are paying off those debts, we hope relatively rapidly, but
Right.
that's all said, talk through and planning, and the savings is building, that potentially you create yourself the ability to become financially independent one day when you get older. We all age. We've talked about that before. Nicole has in the podcast. So that maybe when you reanalyze that, what is your ongoing insurance need is also important to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to intentionally put this in here. We'll often talk with clients to say, hey, just like you go to your doctor every year for your annual checkup, that's why we update your overall financial plan every year. It's a continuing moving target. And to your point, oftentimes our clients are paying down debt, Every year you work, you're saving more. Every year you live, you're a closer year to financial independence. So it does add up. So our point there is, and especially since we're talking to medical professionals, I think we're all aligned here. Go to your doctor regularly, go to your financial planner regularly.
Yeah, exactly.
Because things are going to evolve. And
Exactly.
we love when it's a positive trend, but Stephanie and I have lived enough life. We've worked with enough clients. We all know there's the inevitable bump in the road.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a little bit about life insurance, disability. I do want to highlight for our listeners, it's one where Stephanie and I and our other colleague, that's really where clients generally seem to push back. I think we all know and agree we're going to die. We don't know how, we don't know when. So everyone knows that's happening. Very few people can or want to picture themselves disabled. But especially if you're a medical professional, you're a surgeon, you can't do that, or you can't be on your feet all day or things like that. The disability insurance, it's not inexpensive, but it really is one of the key components of your risk mitigation plan.
Well, and I think, Nicole, you just touched on it, is when we first bring it up, a lot of people picture full disability. And depending on the type of policy you'd like to purchase, that's something that needs to be discussed. If it is partial or because you cannot do certain aspects of your job,
Right.
that's really the part that's important to have a conversation around.
Agreed, because I always say buying disability insurance is very much like buying a car.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a base policy, right? You can get a car with 4 wheels, an engine, steering wheel, and to get you from point A to point B, or you can get all the frills and upgrades.
Exactly.
And the way we look at it with disability, which I would say is a good thing, is you can design it based on your profession and then how much you're trying to protect or what your thoughts are.
Exactly.
Right? Maybe I'm a surgeon and I can't do that, but gosh, if I could teach or write white papers or things like that, I think what you're saying when you brought up the own occupation is maybe you can't do surgery, but you could still get a robust benefit that accounts for that, but you still can stay mentally engaged in your profession.
Exactly. And figuring out the right policy for you.
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That, listeners, is not something you want to do online or, try and figure it out on yourself, because it is the devil's in the details on those.
Yeah. Great.
So,
exactly.
Okay.
So I think that's another, again, what's different about medical professionals when we talk about planning.
Absolutely.
Another differentiator is going to be relating to taxes and saving for retirement. We really touched on that in episode 1. So it's my maybe last plug to go back there if you didn't listen to that. But those are all things that we plan with those medical professionals. And again, another reason why is the increasing income. But here's one other thing we want to focus on is the changing income. So depending on, again, if you are paid via W-2 in your production, you're not going to be someone who has the same income every year. If you own your own practice as well, that will change. Some of that has to do with growth of your practice or just working in what we call more shifts or seeing more patients. Your income's going to change. So when we do a lot of tax planning for you, it's detailed as well, because you may not yet know what you're going to save because it depends on what your earnings are.
Right.
So we like to focus on that with our clients. Then what happens when I was able to earn this much? What should I do and fill up my buckets or pay off my debts? And so it is ebbing and flowing every year. So back to what Nicole mentioned, is planning every single year is so important, because we really never see life stay on one lane forever.
Yeah. For medical professionals, what I've seen, but what I hear you saying is your net income or your net paycheck, if you will, is going to be a moving target every year.
Every year.
So you can't just set it and forget it.
Correct. And that's something that we want to caution against is just doing that in the short term to say, I've self-solved and I've worked enough shifts to cover all the things I have to cover right now.
Okay.
How can we get into the planning for the long term instead of just self-solving and say, oh, you know what, this year we feel like taking a large trip, so I'm just going to work a few more shifts.
Got it.
Want to get away from that mentality and doing that long-term planning so that you as the person who is having the earnings as a household can make those empowered decisions for yourself. and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to pull out another adage I've used with many episodes is here at Private Vista, we really are proponents of pay yourself first. And so even for medical professionals, understanding that the net cash flow or your net income is going to fluctuate, how do we look at it and then say, okay, and then to use Stephanie's parlance, what are the different buckets that represent my goals? And, how am I going to fill those up or reduce them in the case of debt? But you kind of want to have that as the first line item on your cash outflows.
Yeah. And I think on that same note, Nicole, then kind of back to what I was just talking about is a lot of times then what happens is medical professionals are really saving the maximum into the 401k, the 403b,
Sure.
but haven't done any personal savings.
Right. Okay.
And then what happens when you become financially independent, your 401k, your 403b balance, which turns into your IRA, is so large that we don't necessarily have any control over your tax bill because everything is taxable coming back out of those. So how, again, working with our clients, how do we balance the personal savings, the retirement savings, maybe the Roth savings or other things like that to figure out what does your income one day look like when you stop working for money?
Right.
One other piece I'll add on that is another thing that's different for medical professionals is we get approached a lot about what I'll call your side deals, but side deals in terms of should I invest in a surgery center? So
Sure.
only medical professionals can do that. And so what does that look like? How much money should you give it up front? What do you end up getting back out of it? What does that look like for your income today, income in retirement, and when do you get the principal back from that? All things we want to have conversations around because those opportunities will likely show up one day to you.
Right.
So they're important to think through and how they tie into all those other buckets that we're trying to fill at the same time.
Yeah, definitely lots of moving pieces and parts, right? Of this.
Exactly. So I think from that perspective, we've highlighted a lot of ways that medical professionals can be paid, but then what to do with on the planning side of thing. I think we highlight almost everything is the most important, but they're all really important things to work on. And how does it flow back out, if you will? And out might mean to debt, but out might mean to your own savings.
Exactly.
So
yeah, it is interesting when we say cash outflows.
yes.
Of course, yes, you got to, pay the bills and eat and live and educate and things like that. But that's why we do say kind of that first cash outflow is going to be to which of your savings accounts or saving strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, pardon the interruption. I know you are listening to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, and we're happy you're here. If you have any questions, please head over to myprivatevista.com or the show notes to find out how to reach us. We'd love to hear from you.
I think the last piece again is the circling back around to the full compensation bucket of the inflow. So as we wrapped up with how are we going on the cash out, which isn't really necessarily just cash out on a spent or
Right.
keeping your roof over your head, but we're
Right.
talking about the cash out to your debt. But how's this cash coming in? I do encourage listeners to go back to episode 1, but as a reminder, a lot of the cash coming in is tied to how you're compensated, how much you work as a medical professional, but then how are you designed in your retirement plans to save on tax as well? So those tie-ins, and Nicole and I work so closely with our clients, CPAs, accountants, attorneys, all the time for that reason. So I think that's the other way to think about it is the full quarterbacking of your full household and making sure that both partners, if you have a household of more than one, are included in all this planning. Is the last thing that I will say is medical professionals, like all of us, are so busy, but on top of it, they may not have traditional hours. And so
Right.
it's a lot, I see a lot of divide and conquer, but having the time to come back together and bring back together the conversation with your planner, I think is tremendously fulfilling for us as well, to make sure that everyone's aligned as to what the ongoing financial planning needs are, but also that defensive stuff that we don't like to talk about, but we have to do it.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's a key point because you're right. There were medical professionals working a lot of hours. It's not traditionally 9 to 5. So it might not be conducive to have every meeting with both spouses or both partners in the household. But you do want to make sure that both people are aware of who is on the team, what the high level strategies are, what the why we're doing this. And I think more so too, especially if the other spouse or partner is either not working outside the home or not at the same compensation level, it'll probably ease a lot of their anxiety if, God forbid, what happens if, my spouse or partner is no longer here or able to work at this level.
Exactly. And I think that's really the last takeaway that I would say. And even when you say non-traditional hours, Nicole, it's sometimes I haven't spoken to my spouse or partner about anything that's not fun when we're taking a break from our professional lives in
right.
over a month, right? When we see each other, we're trying to just
keep
catch
it
up
light
keep it light, catch up on the kids, do our traveling, or go see
Sure.
entertainment and friends and other family. And so that's where it gets even trickier, is that I tend to see longer stretches of having these conversations. So we're really here to help keep you on that scheduled conversations about these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can be a good excuse.
Right.
We also have guides and tips and things like that for, you don't need to talk about everything over dinner on Saturday night.
Exactly.
Maybe you pick one thing, right? Like, let's just talk about what if, God forbid, something does happen to you, right? Or, what is the plan to get rid of our debt or things like that?
Exactly.
So yeah, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. We can prioritize and then pick them off one at a time.
Exactly.
So, well, great. Well, again, if you're listening to this, you didn't have a chance to listen to episode 1, we'd highly recommend you do that. And then you'll have the full picture of some of the things that we help our clients with, or things to consider as you are either embarking on your financial planning journey, or maybe, you're just at a point where you're like, hey, I think it might make sense to talk to someone who this is what they eat, live, and breathe on a daily basis. So thanks again for coming in. I appreciate you sharing your time and what I personally know is a small slice of your knowledge in working with medical professionals. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was very much fun.
Oh my God. Absolutely. We'll definitely have you back. And then before we go, I think, as you know, and I know our listeners know, I always ask all my guests, if you could live anywhere in the world, no time constraints, Craig and Renee wouldn't be crabby if they weren't down the street, didn't have school districts or anything like that, where would you and James and the girls live?
I think the answer really is, I love a big city and the vibrant ability for different foods, different cultures, cool things like that, but also can't get us off the ski lift on break. So I think there's got to be a larger city somewhere in Europe that's very close to the mountains, like a short 20-minute drive.
Absolutely.
With the big city. So
my homeland of Italy.
Right there.
Is a good option.
Exactly. Yes. So something like that. Unfortunately, I've never been to Italy yet, so we have to put that on the
Put
list
it on
first,
the list.
but
Yes.
that's I think is where we would end up landing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, we'll be close by then, because
Okay.
right now I'm planning on either retiring to Portugal, Spain, or Italy.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. Very cool.
Thank you again for having me.
I'm going to retire to a different place every time, every different episode. So
I know, right? The list continues to grow, Bill.
it just continues to grow. Although I do have a really quick, funny ski story, because, and this references back to part 1, when Stephanie suddenly found that she was the worst skier in her family.
Mm-hmm.
I was a ski chaperone for a ski club,
Oh,
and my daughter learned to ski. And I mean, like 3 months into this, my daughter shot past me and another chaperone, and she was going down the hill like a bullet out of a gun. And I turned to the other ski chaperone and I said, "Don't you dare tell her mother."
Exactly.
I believe Stephanie's experienced that with her youngest, Mackenzie.
I have, and I didn't watch. I just closed my eyes.
No,
Sent
no,
James after her.
you can't do it. But yeah, I understand your,
Oh my
your
gosh.
desire to be near a ski slope. I totally do. It's fantastic. Really good conversation. And I do want to encourage people who only listen to part 2 to go back and take in part 1, because it gives you a nice, full, complete picture of things you need to be thinking about. And for the record, this is for you, Nicole, I do go to my doctor annually, and I do go to my financial advisor annually.
Oh, gold
I'm here to
star for
testify.
you.
It's painless, people.
Gold star
For
for
those who
you.
are listening and who maybe don't have a financial advisor, or they're thinking some of the things that were said today and discussed in these past 2 episodes might be worthwhile to discuss further. How do they get a hold of y'all to have those conversations?
Yeah, there's 2 ways. They can certainly call us at 312-831-4370 and ask for Stephanie, or visit our website, myprivatevista.com. On our homepage, there's a contact us button. Fill out your information. Please reference this episode and that you'd like to be connected with Stephanie, and we will make that happen in short order.
Fantastic. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast for the first time and are not yet subscribers, there's something very easy you can do. You can reach out and hit the follow button, or the subscribe button. That way, every time Nicole drops a new episode of the podcast, you'll be notified and you can give it a listen. Until the next episode, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of Nicole Romito and everybody at My Private Vista. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And I would remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. It's a choice. Thanks so much. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Dollars and Cents Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, sponsored by Private Vista. Visit our website at www.myprivatevista.com or give us a call at 312-831-4370. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Private Vista is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other data or information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties expressed or implied as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions, or results obtained from the use of this information. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC assume no liability for action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced. Such data and other information are subject to changes without notice. This was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates.